All right, so Genesis is one of the most argued books in the Bible. There are three narratives in the Bible that are under attack the most. Does anyone remember what they are? What three they are? Two of them are found in Genesis. Creation, flood, resurrection, right, exactly. And so two of those are found in Genesis. So Genesis is constantly under attack, but Jesus himself gives validity to Genesis. There's over 200 quotes from Genesis in the New Testament. All New Testament authors refer to Genesis chapter 1 through 11 in some form or fashion. Jesus refers to Genesis chapter 1 through 11 at least 6 times, so giving validity to Genesis. You switch it?
Hasn't it already been proved that the flood actually happened?
There's evidence for that, yeah. There's evidence for a global flood. You got it? There we go. All right, the objectives of our study to help us build faith, all right? To help us be ready to answer questions, all right? To answer questions about these things. You know, with the internet, I've been able to reunite with a lot of old friends, and it's kind of surprising to find out how many old friends are atheists, right? Or don't believe in God, or not religious, or aren't concerned with it. So it's very good. I just reconnected with a guy a couple weeks ago, and I just found out that he's an atheist. So working on talking with him and see why he believes what he believes. And so this is really coming in handy. So it helps us to answer questions and to understand the importance of the book of Genesis. Does anyone remember what the book of Genesis, what that word Genesis means? Flip it, Ray. What is it? Beginning, origin, or source. I'll put that zapper on, Ray. There you go. Go ahead, brother. Okay, Genesis, what we are doing here, how we got here, why we are here. It answers those questions for us. All right. All right, I'm just going to get a quick review. What we've gone over the past couple weeks, just a couple highlights, and we'll get going on our lesson today. It gives us the origin of the universe, the origin of order and complexity, the origin of the solar system, the origin of the atmosphere and hydrosphere, the origin of life, the origin of man, the origin of marriage, origin of evil, the origin of language. I didn't mean to put marriage and evil so close together right there. Origin of language, origin of government, the origin of culture, the origin of nations, the origin of religion, and the origin of the chosen people. All right, so those are all things that, with 14 different things that we find the source of in the book of Genesis. And so there's no other document in the face of the earth that gives a detail of the origin of the universe or of the world. No document makes those claims the way that the Bible does. And so it's a book that's extremely important to us, to our society, especially to our young people. I said this the other week that one of the diagnoses for the lack of retention of teenagers within the Lord's church is that we don't teach them apologetics, right? We don't teach them exactly, what exactly does evolution teach? What does it consist of? What does the Bible say? We spend a lot of time outside of the body of Christ doing that, but not enough time with our young people in it. All right, and then last week we went over the laws of probability, right? And I just want to hit on this, the law of chance. If I have a die, how many of you ever played dice? Come. No. Look at, we rolled dice before, right? I was messing with you. Yeah, we rolled dice before, right? What's the chances of rolling a 6? How many 6s are there on? There's 1, right? How many sides are on that cube? 6, right? So what are the chances of rolling a 6 mathematically? 1 to 6, right? So So the probability of you rolling a 6, rolling a 6, 1 and 6, right? And so that's kind of how, probability works. We looked at Emile Borel, a mathematician. Now, you might think, what's math? Mathematicians have to do with science, but the sciences consist of mathematicians, biologists, physics, and natural science, what we see in nature. So they're all intertwined. Emile Borel stated that events whose probability is extremely small never happen. If the probability of a certain event happening in the universe is less than 1 in 1045, that's not 1045, it's actually 10 to the 45th power. Human beings intuitively categorize that event as so unlikely that we consider it to be an impossible event. So it has a possibility of what? 0, basically, right? It has a possibility of 0. I keep wanting to click that. And so this is 1 10 to the 45th power. All right, doesn't mean 1 out of 1045. It's a 1 with 45 zeros after it. All right, so I don't even know what that number is. I don't know what you would call that number. But anyways, I just put it out there so you can see how many zeros it is. So anything that has a lower probability than this is subject to the single law of chance, which means it has a probability of 0, right, of happening. And so, evolutionist Harold Morowitz of Yale estimated the probability of the formation of the smallest and simplest living organisms to be 1 in 10 to the 340 million. I wasn't going to put a 1 with 340 million zeros after it. All right, that wouldn't fit on this. It takes several screens, okay? So this is well beyond the single law of chance, right? It's well beyond that, yeah? Well beyond. Carl Sagan, now these are all evolutionists. These are their calculations. Carl Sagan, 1 in 102 billion. Oh, no, it's 10, I'm sorry. I misspoke. 10 to the 2 billionth power. 10 to the 2 billion. That's a 1 with 2 billion zeros. All right? So that's well beyond Emile Borel's estimated for the law of chance. The law of chance is 1 in 10 to the 45th power. Does everyone understand that? All right? Mathematically, it's an impossibility. All right, and that's an important thing to remember. This is an important thing to remember if you're going to talk to someone about God, about creation, about evolution, and spontaneous generation or abiogenesis. Right? It's a mathematical impossibility. The probability is 0. Right? Just based on the mathematical equations that have been done by evolutionists themselves. Discredit the theory or hypothesis. Oops, I keep going out. See, all right. Prominent evolutionist Richard Dawkins admitted the more statistically improbable a thing is, the less we can believe that it just happened by blind chance. Superficially, the obvious alternative to chance is an intelligent designer. Richard Dawkins is the author of the book, The God Delusion. All right, very prominent evolutionist. All right. Well, the next one, skip that one. All right, you ever was there? I'm losing my voice. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. All right, very simple. We're going to deal with the, Genesis 1, verse 1 this evening. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. One of the questions that often comes up, perhaps to stump Christians, or this question is often given thinking that there's not an answer for it, is who created God, right? Who created the Creator? Right. Who created the Creator? What would you have to say about that if I just asked you right now, who created God? What answer would you give? Who created God? M?
Don't have an answer.
Don't have an answer?
He's always here.
So he's always here? Think about what Jesus said in John, I think it's 8:58. Said, truly, truly, before Abraham was, he said what? I am, right? The great I am. And so we understand God as to be an eternal being. Evolutionists, atheists, they want to know, well, if God created the heavens and the earth, and who created God? It's a legitimate question, don't you think? Yeah? Ought to have an answer for it? Yeah. And so some things to think about as we seek to answer this question, who created God? This question assumes that God is affected by time, by space, and by matter. Now that seems like maybe seems like a weird statement, but as we go through it, I think it'll give us some enlightenment. This question assumes that God is affected by time and by space and by matter. So time, space, and matter must come into existence together. All right? Time, space, and matter had to have come into existence together because hey, my flipper fell. There we go. Can there be matter without space? Ask that question. Can there be matter without space? Can there be matter without space? What do you think? If there were matter without space, where would you put it? You ever have too much matter and not enough space? What happens when you get a house? You get a house and you fill it up with matter, then you don't have enough space. What do you got to do, Ernie? Clean it out. That's Ernie. Get a bigger space, right? You put more stuff in it. Then it gets too small. Then get another one. I like Ernie's answer though. Clean it out. Do some spring cleaning. But without space, there can be no matter. If there's matter and space, when would you put it? Now remember, before the 1920s, a lot of scientists were saying, not a lot of scientists, but the idea was put forth before the 1920s that matter was eternal. Remember we talked about that? And as I started to build advanced telescopes and look out into the universe and noticed that the universe seemed like it was expanding, and so that's when they came up with the Big Bang Theory, because the universe appears to them to be expanding, and so obviously if you put that in reverse, then it all came from one solid little ball, I guess, so to speak, as the Big Bang Theory postulates. So if there's matter and space, when would you put it? It needs a time to be put in, because matter and space are not eternal, right? Next. All right. So we go Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. These things came into existence simultaneously or together, or you can say were time, space, matter continuum, right? You need time, space, and matter had to come in to existence together, all right? And so in the beginning, Genesis says 1:1 says what? What time? I just gave you. That's on the word, right? In the beginning, right? So that gives us a time, all right? Now, like I said before, through the 20s and through 1920s and 1950s is when the Big Bang Theory started gaining traction, and so scientists conceded what Christians had been taught in the very first sentence of the Bible, that there is a what? a beginning, right? That there is a beginning. Because before that, it was taught mostly that matter was eternal. It was thought rather that matter was eternal. All right, space, the heavens. In the beginning, God created the heavens. That's the space. I remember we said that you need time, space, and matter to come into existence simultaneously. All right. So in the beginning, God created the heavens. That is that gives us the space and the earth. God created the heavens and the earth, the matter, right? And so the very first sentence of the Bible goes right along with the space, time, matter continuum, right? That is what those are essential to the universe, and they would have to come into existence simultaneously, right? All right. Let's see. Before we get into this, well, no, good. All right. Time. This is often called the Trinity of Trinities. All right. Time. You remember this? Kind of remember it this way. Time, matter, and space. All right. That's three. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Right. And the time is past. There's past, present, future in time. Space, there's length, there's width, and there's height. And in matter, there's solid, there's liquid, and there's gas. Just something for you to write down there. All right, the God who created time, space, and matter must dwell outside of them. Right? Does that make sense? The God that created time, space, and matter must dwell outside of time, space, and matter, yes? All right. And so when asked, who created God? Or where did God come from? See, God has always been is the answer that we would give, right? God is eternal. God has always been, right? And we find that to agree with what science teaches right there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, that God created the heavens and the earth, time, matter, and space coming into existence simultaneously, but God being outside of those are not subject to those. If God was subject to time, if God was subject to matter, if God was subject to space, would he be a God worth worshiping? And when you and I look at one of the evidences of if the Bible is right or if the Bible is from God, 2 Timothy 3:16, 17, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, right? I'll ask you, well, why do you believe the Bible? Why do you believe what the Bible says? Why do you believe that the Bible is God's Word? What are you going to say? What do you think? Can you give me something to go on? I'm a skeptic here. Why do you think that the Bible is God-breathed or God's Word? Somebody. What do you think, Ernie?
I defer to Gary.
You defer to Gary? How do you answer that? Why do you think that the Bible is God's Word? Well, how would you answer somebody if they asked you that out of the blue? What would you give?
I'd ask them to disprove it.
Ask them to disprove it?
Yeah.
That's one way.
Historically, archaeologically,
Accurate.
it's perfect.
Accurate.
It's accurate.
Now I think that's given somebody more of something to chew on there. You know, it's the historical accuracy, the historicity of the Bible, geologically correct,
One of the things
culturally also got.
One of the things I've done, in fact, I did it at Penn State. Kid looked at me one day and he said, "You don't really believe that, do you?" I said, "I want to ask you a question. Have you read it? Or are you just going what somebody told you it says?"
Right.
I said, "What would you think if I get up here and taught a whole lesson for a whole semester, and you found out that everything I said to you wasn't true?" I said, where have you really investigated?
Right. Well, that you did no
And it
research
stumps.
on any of it.
99.9% it stumps,
Yeah.
because they haven't.
Right. Yeah.
So I turned the table on them very quickly.
Very few people study the Bible, they spend more time maybe studying questions that they've been told that can stump Christians, right? Or aggravate Christians. Yeah. The historical accuracy of the Bible, geographical accuracy of the Bible, well, to go along with the archaeology, was it the Hittites that were thought to not exist?
Well, you know, you hit one last week.
What's that?
You hit one last week, the expanding universe. And I'd say to my students, we were taught for a fact, when I went to school, that all matter always has been, always will be.
Oh, so you were taught that in,
Oh,
in
my
school?
goodness.
Where,
And I
at the
brought that
university or?
What's that?
At university or? in
No,
high
no,
school?
high school.
In
Brooklyn.
high school, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember that very plainly. And with the Voyager and everything going out, I would always draw a line. I said, okay, here it is. This is a fact we know for sure now. We have an expanding hydrogen universe.
yeah,
Okay? If you look at a movie camera, then as we go next year, it gets wider and wider. Put the motion picture in reverse. You're
Yeah.
shrinking every time. You come back to a point of origin. Now I say to them, who is wrong?
exactly.
If this is the truth, what else have we been told wrong?
Right. Yeah, science is continually making new discoveries, right?
Absolutely.
And so here's the thing, and this is one thing I don't want, either our viewers, either online, we're not beating up on science, right? We don't think that science and the Bible are adversaries. What we are stating is that a lot of our contemporary scientists are taking science and the laws of science beyond where they were meant to go. I gave you the law of chance, right? And the laws of probability, right? For a reason. That is one law of the law of chance that's been taken way beyond where it should have been, where the boundaries were written, right? And so there are a lot of liberties being taken with science, right? And a lot of theories are taught as if they're facts. Now Gary said, I don't know, was anybody else taught that matter was eternal when they were in high school? No. Well, Gary's Miss Finwood. Now,
We paid attention in science class.
did you pay attention either? I wasn't paying attention.
I did.
I was gonna say it's too long ago.
But you know, even then, that stuck out in my mind.
But that was the way they taught.
It makes you
us.
question, right? Just the premise itself. It's like, is that right? Right? And so there's when you start looking into digging into evolution and abiogenesis, spontaneous generation, the Big Bang, what you find is the probability is zero, admitted by many evolutionists. Therefore, it's not based on evidence or facts, right? And it's more of a hypothesis than a theory, right? Now, a hypothesis, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, is basically an idea with very little evidence, right? It becomes a theory when enough evidence is gained. I guess it's probably a subjective standard. When enough evidence is gained, it becomes a theory, right? So we have the theory, the Big Bang theory, right? It's more of just an idea or a hypothesis. There's no fact, there's no evidence to support it. Now, I'll ask Gary this. Are there laws in the state of Pennsylvania? There's laws almost in every state. I should ask this. Are there laws in almost every state against teaching in high school something that is based on no evidence or fact?
Yeah.
Yeah. in almost every state that I know of, I didn't look at everyone, I looked at like 6 or 7 and I stopped. In every state, there, even California, believe that, right? Even California, right? There are laws against it, that state that you must, whatever you're teaching, the children must be backed up by facts, by evidence, must be subject to to experiment, right? So on and so forth, right? And that's something that the Big Bang Theory, the spontaneous generation, abiogenesis, and so on and so forth, there's no evidence, right? And there's no facts there. So I will assure you, what that is being, if that's being taught in your schools, that is illegal. Now, how many states enforce that? How many states have even looked into it, you think?
Probably none.
Yeah. Speaking of reverse biology, he looks about 10 years younger there. Well, almost didn't recognize you. I haven't seen him since he shaved the beard. Yeah, there are laws in every state against teaching something that's not based on fact or evidence. And that is something that evolution, abiogenesis, spontaneous generation, Big Bang Theory would be subject to, without a doubt. Are there any comments or questions on anything? All right, God who created time. Hey, Ray, can you back up? Go the other way. All right, yeah, we went through that. Okay, go that. Now reverse that bad boy. Go another slide. One more. Oh no, go the other way, Ray. Sorry. Yep, keep going. Okay. The question, where did God come from, is assuming a limited, is assuming, the assumption is being made is that there are limitations upon God, right? Who created the Creator, right? That is simply assuming that there are limitations on God. If there are limitations such as that on God, would He be worth worshiping? If He was subject to time and space and matter? Be the almighty, infinite, all-knowing God. And so the God that created time, that created space, that created matter, dwells outside of them. And so the question, where did God come from, is assuming a limited God. All right, go one more. Garrett, Ray. All right. So in the beginning, God had no beginning, right? But the Bible gives us very, not only God could do it in such a simple way, could it? How else could you, you want to get into the physics of the universe? Right? That's that. Surely that's I call it alphabet math, right? The mathematical equations. There's no numbers in there, right? Yeah. It's astronomical. A lot of atheists, including Richard Dawkins and Carl Sagan, have said that if there is a God, the world is so complex that He has to be a master physicist, biologist, mathematician. And it's like, yeah, exactly, all right. Those things don't stump God. You go back to 1 Corinthians. The wisdom of the wise is like what to God? It's foolishness, right? Right. For every answer that is answered in science, it raises about 1,000 more questions. For every question that's answered, raises another 1,000 questions. So, in the beginning, God. Right? God had no beginning. He is the causation of creation. The Big Bang Theory has no causation. Right? The Big Bang is not a cause. What is it?
Result.
It's a result or an effect. Right? It's not the cause. The Big Bang Theory that's always been the question, right? Well, what went bang and what caused the bang? Right? It's amazing that when you journey through from today, going back to the Big Bang, I mean, you'll get lost in the physics and the evolution and the biology and the big words and that, and then it all comes back to this idea of the Big Bang. It was just a bang. You ever think about that? Bang. How do you come up? I'm not mocking, but think of, what happened? You know, when you're sitting there, and you think about like, two scientists sitting in a room and it just went bang, man. I always think of it, I think it'd make a good Cheech and Chong, like, thing, right? It went bang. It's like, no, man, it was a big bang, right? Right? A big bang. The primordial soup. Primordial soup? What's primordial mean? Existing since the beginning of time, right? Primordial soup affirms that there was a beginning, right? Because primordial means existing since the beginning of time. So it's the eternal stew, if you would. Eternal soup, right? But we understand that in the beginning, there was a beginning. That is one of the first things that the Bible postulates, and very simply says that in the beginning, God, the causation. And He is eternal. You think of, I had the verse written down here, I don't know what I did with it. Everlasting to everlasting. Psalm 90 in verse 2. All of the faithful people of God throughout the Bible, I shouldn't say all of them, the majority of the books of the Bible have men and women in there that affirm and assign creation to God. Psalms 90 and verse 2. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. Even from everlasting to everlasting, says, you are God. Right? God is eternal. The I am. The ever-present, always present, and eternal God. He is eternal. There any other? If you all have any verses that you want to add to this, anything that pops in your pops into your mind, please bring it forth.
Lenny,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to know what happened after the bang. What was there? What did they
What
see?
was there after the
Yeah.
bang?
Yeah, what was
It was chaos, disorder. I'm not saying that this is what is. This is what I understand from what I've researched. Right? All right. So it's a bit of a maze, right? Because everybody has their own little ideas about it because there's no evidence of this at all. And so I'll give you what Richard Dawkins says. Now, I pick on Richard Dawkins because he's the author of The God Delusion, right? So naturally, right, we're going to get after that. All right, so what they basically come to understand is that when they do, as Gary said, right, they put the cameras in reverse, right, and so the universe comes back in together, and ultimately what the hypothesis says, it's not a theory, hypothesis says is that it comes together into a small ball, and Richard Dawkins postulates that it was basically nothing. Now, I've made this statement almost every week. In Richard Dawkins' interview with Krauss, it wasn't with John Lennox. The first week, I need to correct that. The first week I was here, I said it was an interview that Richard Dawkins did with John Lennox, and it's not. It's with another evolutionist, Krauss, right? Not Larry. It's not. I don't know if he's related to Larry. It does. His hairline is receding a bit, and he does have a weird laugh. But but he says that all the universe came down to this small, infinitesimal matter, ultimately nothing. And so what his postulation was is that we must now consider that nothing is actually something. All right? And so something, all right, this is confusing, isn't it? Oh, so nothing became something, right? And then the Big Bang, all right, and then so matter starts to expand and collect, and I guess everything starts spinning in chaos. From what I've seen, they basically have the Earth as a big black ball, like fire, right? It'd be fire, it'd be hot because of this matter. It would be hot. So everything that exploded from nothing, that became something, right, was super. What do you want to say? How do you say super hot? Superheated, right? It's superheated, and so there's some animations about it, So the Earth is like this big black ball, right, with fire all over it, and eventually it goes out and then the primordial soup, right, the eternal stew, right, starts forming, right, and then out of it comes amino acids are formed, which are building blocks of proteins, DNA, those are bipolymers, DNA, and amino acids, proteins, and there's one other one. Can't think of what the other one is. It'll come to me. But anyways, these are formed. These are the building blocks of life, right? And then through random processes, right? Through random processes, they become more complex, right? And they start building, right? Through random processes. All right. And so one of the things that evolution has to ride with is that we started as this single cell, right? A simple single cell, and we evolved into this complex body or organism, right? And so things are becoming more what? Complex, right? What's the Bible teach? What's it teach? We are becoming more complex and perfected, right? That's what evolution's teaching, that by random processes we are becoming more and more complex, and therefore reaching perfection of evolution. What's the Bible say? Things were perfect in the beginning, right? And so it teaches. Isn't that ironic? It gives me the chills when you think about that. It's the exact opposite, isn't it? The Bible teaches the exact opposite. Everything was perfect in the beginning. Man, earth, everything was created perfect, right? And because of sin, because of error, because of disobedience, what? It's actually in a state of what? Perfect decline, right? Deterioration, if you will, right? How pre-deluge or before the flood, how long were individuals living?
900, 800.
Yeah, 800, 900 years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 years, right? So after the cataclysmic flood, what did we notice? Life expectancy has been drastically cut down, right? And so the earth, the earth itself is in a state of deterioration. Now evolution teaches at the beginning, after the Big Bang, everything was superheated, Earth's a big ball of fire, primordial soup, all right, the greenhouse starts growing, and so the earth even itself is in a state of becoming more what? Complex, right? Becoming more complex and in a state of evolution. All right? So evolution teaches that things are getting more complex and growing That's not what we see though. Do you think the earth is in a state of growth, or is on a trajectory to be more complex? Or do we see that it's breaking down? Do we see that our atmosphere is breaking down, right? We see that deterioration on there. And so they're what's being taught is polar opposite. And that, I don't know if that's even done on purpose, you read the Bible and you understand that, the whole world is under the sway of what? Or under the influence, right, of the devil, right? And it's exactly the opposite of what God says. Are there any comments or questions as we close? All right, he is eternal. He is infinite, right? He's limitless, endless. He is impossible to measure, right? Infinite. Actually, the definition of infinite it means that he is endless in space, right? He is self-existent. He doesn't rely on you, me, or anyone else for his existence. And he is the supreme being. He is the ideal, right? Em, did you have an ideal man in mind? You got married? She said. Stay walking.
It's a good thing.
God is the ideal, right? Everybody wants the ideal man or the ideal woman, but God is the ideal individual.